Let me be as straight as I can be about the choice of economic policies that you are going to face. And I'm going to start with the story that not every Republican, but most Republican candidates up and down the ticket are telling. And it goes something like this. And I think this is pretty fair, and if you don't, then you can look it up. So their basic story is America's working class, America's middle class, families like yours, have been victimized by a big, bloated federal government run by a bunch of left-wing elitists like me. And the government's taking your hard-earned tax dollars, and it's giving them to freeloaders and welfare cheats, and we're strangling business with endless regulations, and this federal government is letting immigrants and foreigners steal whatever jobs Obamacare hasn't killed yet. No, look, I'm being serious here. I mean, that's the story that's been told. And I haven't, turned on Fox News or listened to conservative talk radio yet today, but I've turned them on enough over these past 7.5 years to know I'm not exaggerating in terms of their story. That's the story they tell.
Watch the exact moment Barack Obama completely loses his academic filter, steps straight into the ring, and uses brutal, unvarnished facts to dismantle Donald Trump's entire economic playbook, leaving the audience in absolute roars.
You can hear it from just about every member of Congress on the other side of the aisle. And instead of telling you what they're for, they've defined their economic agenda by what they're against, and that's mainly being against me. And their basic message is anti-government, anti-immigrant, anti-trade, and let's face it, it's anti-change. And look, a lot of people believe it. And if what they were saying were true, I suppose it would make sense to run on a platform of just rolling back everything we've done over these past 7.5 years, and happy days would be here again. If what they were saying was true, then just being against whatever it is that we've done might make sense. But what they're saying isn't true. And if we're going to fix what's really wrong with the economy, we've got to understand that. So let me just do some quick myth busting. And I'm going to start with the biggest myth, which is that the federal government keeps growing and growing and growing and wasting your money and giving your tax dollars to people who don't deserve it. Now, here's the truth. You can look it up. These journalists here, they can do some fact checking. As a share of the economy, we spend less on domestic priorities outside of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We spend less than we did when Ronald Reagan was president. When President Reagan or George W. Bush held this job, our deficits got bigger. When Bill Clinton and I have held this job, deficits have gotten smaller. Our deficits have not grown these past 7.5 years. We've actually cut the deficit by almost 75%. Moreover, there are fewer families on welfare than in the 1990s. Funding has been frozen for 2 decades. So there's not a whole bunch of giveaways going on right now. Aside from our obligation to care for the elderly and Americans with disabilities, the vast majority of people who get help from the federal government are families of all backgrounds who are working, striving to get back on their feet, striving to get back into the middle class, and sometimes, yes, their kids need temporary help from food stamps when mom and dad are between jobs. But look, these kids didn't cause the financial crisis. These kids aren't spending us into bankruptcy. They're not what's holding back the middle class. And by the way, neither is Obamacare. Let's look at the numbers. Again, I I'm just giving facts here. I will have some opinions later, but right now I'm just giving facts. I signed the Affordable Care Act into law over 6 years ago. Since then, our businesses have created jobs every single month. We did this while covering 20 million Americans who didn't have health insurance, ending discrimination against pre-existing conditions for everybody, including those who had health insurance, dramatically slowing the rate at which healthcare costs were going up. In the decade before Obamacare, employer-based premiums grew by an average of 8% a year. That meant you were paying that much more every year for health insurance. Last year, they grew by 4%, half as fast as they were growing. That doesn't mean you're happy about the 4%, but it wasn't 8. Today, the average family's health insurance premium is $2,600 less than it would have been if premiums had kept on going up at the pace before Obamacare. And by the way, just for folks here in Indiana, last year most Hoosiers who shopped around for Obamacare on healthcare.gov found plans that cost $75 a month or less. For the millions of Americans who buy on healthcare.gov, they get tax credits to help them pay for it. The average price increase this year has been $4 a month. It hasn't been a double-digit percentage hike, $4 a month. But my bigger point is to bust this myth of crazy, liberal government spending. Government spending is not what is squeezing the middle class. Myth number 2 is the notion that my administration has killed jobs through overregulation. Now, you know, back in the 60s and the 70s, government was adding all kinds of regulations. Rules protecting workers' rights, rules protecting the environment. And these regulations to improve public health and safety, they didn't crush the economic growth that took place back in the 60s and the 70s, and they're not crushing economic growth now. I've issued fewer regulations than my predecessor. I've issued fewer executive orders than any two-term president since Ulysses S. Grant. That's a long time ago. The regulations that we have issued, rules to protect our air and our water, rules to keep families from getting cheated when buying a house or investing their savings, those rules have benefited our economy a lot more than they've cost. They've helped families. They've helped the middle class. They haven't hurt them. Here's myth number 3. Other countries are killing us on trade. Now, it is true that a lot of supporters of trade deals in the past sometimes oversold all the good that it was going to do for the economy. The truth is the benefits of trade are usually widely spread. It's one of the reasons why you can buy that big flat screen TV for a couple $100, why the cost of a lot of basic necessities have gone down. Some parts of the economy, like the agricultural sector or the tech sector, have really done well with trade. Some sectors and communities have been hurt by foreign competition. And what's also true is sometimes the pain of a plant closing here in America is magnified when you know that other countries are cheating. They're keeping American goods out of their markets. They're unfairly subsidizing their businesses to undercut our businesses. And a lot of the worst violators, they don't even have trade deals with us at all. So here's what we've done. Over the past 7 years, we've brought more trade cases against other countries for cheating than anybody else. Every case that's been decided, America has won. That's what we've done, making sure that we got a level playing field. But the truth is, trade has helped our country a lot more than it's hurt us. Exports helped lead us out of the recession. Companies that export pay workers higher wages than folks who don't export. And anybody who says that somehow shutting ourselves off from trade is going to bring jobs back, they're just not telling the truth. In fact, most of the manufacturing jobs that we lost over the past decade They weren't the result of trade deals. They were the result of technology and automation that lets businesses make more stuff with fewer workers. If you go into an auto plant these days, used to need several thousand workers, now they need 1,000 workers to produce the same number of cars. Just because they're robots and they're machines that have replaced a lot of the work. That's true in offices too, by the way. Think about bank tellers, last time you dealt with one of those, because now you got ATM machines. So we can't put technology back in a box any more than we can cut ourselves off from the global supply chain. All the RVs that are manufactured right here, I guarantee you some of those parts came from someplace else. And then we sell them back to other parts of the world. And no matter how many tariffs we're threatening to slap on other countries' goods, no matter how many trade wars we start saying we're going to put in place, that's not going to help middle-class families here. In fact, independent economists say a trade war would trigger another recession and cost millions of jobs. So when you hear somebody threatening to cut off trade and saying that that's standing up for American workers, that's just not true. Here's the fourth myth, that immigrants are taking all of our jobs. Now let's look at the numbers. Right now, the number of people trying to cross our border illegally is near its lowest level in 40 years. It's near its lowest level in 40 years. It's lower than than it was before I came into office. It's lower than during Ronald Reagan's time. It's true that new immigrants sometimes compete for service and construction jobs, but they also start about 30% of all new businesses in America.
Obama started by laying out that classic conservative narrative. You know the one, a massive, bloated government is taking your hard-earned tax dollars, giving them to people who don't want to work, and strangling businesses with endless regulations. It's a simple story, and honestly, if it were true, well, running on a platform to just roll everything back would make total sense. But it just isn't true, and Obama brought the actual numbers to prove it. Take government spending. The right loves to claim the federal government keeps growing and wasting your money. But if you look at domestic spending outside of programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, we were actually spending less as a share of the economy than when Ronald Reagan was president. Wow! And look at the deficits. Under Reagan and George W. Bush, deficits got bigger. Under Bill Clinton and Obama, they shrank. In fact, Obama cut the deficit by nearly 75%. Then there's Obamacare. We were told it would absolutely destroy the job market. Instead, seriously, from the moment it was signed, private businesses created jobs every single month. It covered 20 million people who didn't have insurance, ended discrimination for pre-existing conditions, and literally cut the growth rate of healthcare premiums in half. Before the law, premiums were jumping 8% a year. Afterward, that dropped to 4%. Is a 4% increase perfect? No, but it saved the average family about $2,600 a year compared to where things were heading. And regulations. The right talks about them like they are handcuffs on the economy. But Obama actually issued fewer regulations than his predecessor, and fewer executive orders than any two-term president since Ulysses S. Grant. Yeah, that's a really long time ago. The rules he did put in place were things like protecting clean air and water, or making sure families didn't get cheated when buying a house. Those don't hurt the middle class, they protect it. The next big myth he tackled is a huge talking point today, the idea that other countries are just killing us on trade and stealing our jobs. Now, Obama was fair here. He admitted that past trade deals were sometimes oversold, and that foreign competition has absolutely hurt specific manufacturing towns, especially when other countries cheat the system. His administration actually brought more trade cases against cheating countries than anyone else, and won every single one. But here's the reality check that populist politicians hate to talk about. Shutting ourselves off from the global economy or slapping massive tariffs on everything isn't going to magically bring those old factory jobs back. Why? Because most of the manufacturing jobs lost over the last couple of decades weren't lost because of trade deals, they were lost because of technology and automation. Think about it. If you walk into a modern auto plant today, a process that used to require several thousand workers now only needs about 1,000. Why? Because robots and machines do the heavy lifting now. The same thing happened in offices, and it happened at banks when ATMs came around. You can't put technology back in a box. Starting a trade war doesn't help the middle class. Independent economists agree. It just triggers recessions and costs millions of more jobs. This brings us to the real core of the speech, and honestly, the most important takeaway. Obama explained that the entire right-wing playbook relies on a massive distraction. It forces struggling, working-class families to direct all their anger and frustration downward instead of upward. Think about how this works. When times are tough, when wages aren't keeping up with the cost of living, the populist right tells you to look down. Blame the undocumented immigrant. Blame the family on food stamps. Blame the vulnerable. They want you to believe that you're struggling because someone poorer than you is taking a tiny piece of the pie. But Obama looked at the crowd and said, "Let's be serious." It's a powerful reminder that real progress happens when we stop punching down at each other and start looking up to demand a system that actually works for everyone.